Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, as Caroline said, the world is being reset. We're living and we're working at an extraordinary moment in time, and the world is facing unprecedented challenges. Whether these are risks from climate change, rising inequality, changing trade, or threats from international cooperation, these challenges are with us all at what is an unprecedented time. There has never been a more important time for businesses to accelerate that change and that innovation. And as we drive to those new levels of commerce and prosperity across the world, we will today assess many of these areas: global trade, Asia, Africa, digital transformation, inflation markets, ESG, talent, industry transition. So what are the pockets for global growth? And what strategic shift will be on the Treasury's mind? Well, we have a fantastic panel to answer those questions today. Firstly, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Biki Banku, OBE. Biki is President of Southeast Asia Pacific and South Korea at Rolls-Royce. He's actually based in Singapore. Biki is responsible for the regional strategy, external relations and governance, and for the operations across the company's key businesses, and that is civil, aerospace, defence and power systems. Biki actually joined Rolls-Royce here in the UK in the engineering role, overseeing research, and he's been in Singapore since 2009, first of all actually starting his career here in the UK. Ian Chisholm joined Grosvenor in May 2019 as Group Treasurer, following a career in the natural resources sector. Ian is responsible for all aspects of the central Treasury function, including cash management, financial management, ensuring adequate liquidity and executing financing transactions for the Grosvenor Group. Prior to Grosvenor, Ian spent 3 years at BHP as Vice President in Corporate Finance, where he was responsible for corporate finance strategy, debt and equity capital markets. And before that, Ian spent 26 years at Shell in a variety of financing and treasury roles, including the gas and power business and also CEO of the UK Pension Fund. So a massive experience coming with you today. And last but not least, Professor Kostas Markides. Kostas is Professor of Strategy and Entrepreneurship and also Robert Bauman Chair in Strategic Leadership at the London Business School. He's researched a variety of topics, including strategic innovation, business model innovation, diversification, and many international acquisitions. And Kostas's work explores how established companies pursue radical innovation in order to create a culture of continuous innovation and change. He's also recently published his new book, Organising for the New Normal: Prepare Your Company for the Journey of Continuous Disruption. So without further ado, let us move to our panel today. Our first question really thinks and looks at the continent of ASEAN and Asia. It's undeniable that Asia is shifting from being the factory of the world to the marketplace of the world. Southeast and South Asia already account for nearly 30% of global GDP, and we're likely to become even more attractive investment corridors in the future. Now, we know that COVID-19 has accelerated this trend, and also much in terms of digital transformation and public and private partnerships is really focused in Asia. With those critical forces actually playing through, what I'd like to do is start with Biki. So Biki, why is Southeast Asia important, and how do you see these trends evolving? What do you see the potential growth areas for UK and European companies? And what shifts do you look out for in ASEAN? Biki.
Thank you, Claire. Well, if you look at Southeast Asia, it has a population of 650 million, and the combined GDP equivalent is 2.8 trillion. And you mentioned ASEAN, which is really the association of Southeast Asian nations, combining of 10 countries from Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and many others. And they have a key sort of focus in promoting economic, political, and security cooperation. And that's allowed them to actually be growing at quite a significant rate. And the annual GDP growth averages to about 5% per annum. At this trajectory, ASEAN is forecast to overtake the EU and Japan to become the fourth economy in the world by 2030, behind China, India, and the US. And there are focus areas through the region that comes through an economic cooperation. And these are goods, services, and investments. And this is done through the ASEAN Economic Community. You mentioned about the potential growth areas for UK and European companies. I think the more recent move by the AEC is towards digital economy. ASEAN has 330 million internet users, third largest in the world. Its internet economy is expected to reach USD 200 billion by 2025. And this is really fueled by the e-commerce growth, particularly in countries like Indonesia and Vietnam. On top of that, we've got 915 million active mobile connections. That's 1.5 times the size of the ASEAN populations. So it's the world's fastest growing internet market. So ASEAN digital economy, I think, is the main sort of synergy with for opportunities with UK and European companies, and it's really driven by the young and growing middle class populations. So there's opportunities here for micro, small, medium-sized enterprises to sort of really benefit from the digital connectivity. I think one of the shifts that we need to look out for, and that I've seen sort of within the region, is how ASEAN is positioned to provide resilience to supply chain. And if you look at the start of the pandemic, we saw global supply chain disruptions. ASEAN was fairly successful in making quick adjustments to trade routes, putting diversification of sources, which was a particular focus, together with the relocation of facilities and industrial partnerships. And I think what we're starting to see in many sort of parallel industries are the shift of supply chain priorities from low-cost sourcing to supply chain resilience. And here the political stability becomes important, and not just internally specific to the country, but how to where the operations resides, but also the political stability between the two countries, and the dependency that exists to us, so that the trade can continue beyond pandemic type disruptions. So many industries are starting to look towards ASEAN as a China +1, in essence, to really keep their options open. If you go beyond the US-China trade war, we're starting to see labor costs in China. Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand have already put in place over the last 12 months preferential policies for companies to who are looking at +1 alternatives. Vietnam is injecting a huge amount to improve its infrastructure to be comparatively advantageous within the region. Thailand FDI rose by 80% year on year. Malaysia FDI rose by 380% year on year. And what we also saw, quite interestingly, was China itself is diversifying its investment into ASEAN. And when trade war investment was at its peak last year, China invested 1.8 billion into ASEAN. So there's a huge amount of shifts that we're starting to see, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
Thanks, Vicky. So well put. And a recent survey that the Standard Chartered actually undertook said that 63% of Chinese investors actually plan to increase production in ASEAN, really for the three reasons: large ASEAN consumer base, local government incentives, and also that real presence of a reliable supply base, as you really eloquently put. I'd like to come on to Ian now. And Ian, the real estate sector has been severely impacted by the pandemic and equally faces a daunting challenge. Clearly, it is establishing a sustainable environment. Could you also now share your observations? Where do you see the direction of travel? And in terms of cities' work and the ways of living, what are you seeing?
Thanks, Claire. You're absolutely right. The pandemic has had a major impact on real estate, across the whole world in a lot of different ways. And everybody says, well, what are the long-term impacts of the pandemic? Well, I think it's really quite early to say with any certainty what the long-term impacts of the pandemic are. We have made tremendous progress with the vaccines, but we're clearly not out of the woods yet, as we've just seen with this week's announcements in the UK of a delayed restart and the final step in the government's progress. So we're not back to normal, and we're not really even back to the new normal, I suppose. I'm therefore very wary of making bold predictions, and those people who do so tend to kind of go to one end of the spectrum. We're all going to work from home forever, or we're all going to go back to the office as soon as we can. I just don't think those things are realistic. I think what we are all seeing is that there's a lot more kind of hybrid working is definitely going to be the name of the game. And I think the other big issue I'd raise is that there's a wide range of local geographic and cultural factors too. So for instance, Grosvenor Asia has got a headquarters in Hong Kong, and the desire to work from home there is very different to the desire to work from home in the UK. So, you know, smaller living spaces clearly have a real impact on people's views on these subjects. But I suppose what I do agree with is the fact that there's a number of trends that have been accelerated by the pandemic. So flexible working was already somewhat in place before the pandemic, but it has been given a massive boost. And, you know, companies will need to find that balance of how to respond to that greater desire for flexibility from their employees without losing the corporate culture that is generally built up in a traditional kind of office environment. Online retail is the obvious other example, a massive boost through the pandemic. And we've already seen many high street businesses in the UK go into administration. So there will be, you know, major changes in the retail environment, and many retail businesses will not survive, but the ones that do will adapt to new technology and new ways of shopping and the kind of new, getting people into the high street and making it a great place to go again. So there clearly will be some short-term winners and short-term losers in the pandemic. So the current buzz phrase is beds, meds and sheds. So beds means residential in all its forms. Residential is performing very well. People still need places to live. And there's a lot of investment going into residential because actually people want larger places to live because they want to be able to work from home more. Meds, of course, is the science parks and laboratories, and you know that clearly that kind of science angle is working extremely well. And sheds are the logistics. The logistics are obviously attracting a huge amount of investment to service that online retail demand. And retail, of course, is the poor relation, and you know, really it is a case that only the good retail in the good locations will thrive. I think the greatest uncertainty is in offices, to come back to that hybrid working. We just don't know how that's going to play out, and as I said, it's going to be different in different places. You know, there will undoubtedly be lower requirements from businesses from hybrid and flexible working, but then they may be offset by more collaboration space, less cramped conditions. And I think there definitely will be a kind of bifurcation between really the top quality offices, the A-grade offices, which will need to be you know, high quality, well ventilated, low carbon intensity, with excellent services, really attracting people back to those offices. Those will have a pricing premium, and it's going to be the kind of secondary and tertiary offices which will struggle a bit more. There's obviously a lot of research going on into the future of the city, and the pandemic really might be the prompt for us to all think about better urban solutions. That kind of prime inner city density will probably still remain, but we may well see more multi-centre cities with more local work opportunities and more local community amenities. So there is, you know, some really big changes going on in the sector.
Thanks, Ian, as always, so eloquently put. And clearly the Treasurer has also got the real estate strategy to have on his agenda as well.
Absolutely.
So let me come to Costas. Costas, as an academic, clearly this means an awful lot of transition. What do you see this meaning for strategic business transition as a whole? Clearly, we haven't yet come on to smart cities. We've talked about new ways of working. We've talked about the corridors of Asia. What do you see as those transitions?
Well, thanks, Claire. First of all, if I could reinforce something that Vicky said about Asia as a region. We all know that Asia is the new growth area and is rising and so on. But I think people still vastly underestimate how big Asia and the Asian region is becoming in the digital economy. Just to give you a couple of statistics here, just to impress upon people the magnitude of the change we're talking about here. 90% of the world's data centers right now are located either in North America or in Asia, and the majority of that is in Asia. 75% of all cloud computing is either in the United States or in Asia. 75% of all patents related to blockchain, they are either in the United States or Asia and so on. 50% of all spending on IoT is either in the United States or Asia and the Asian region and so on. You may have noticed the lack of mention of Europe in all of these statistics. Europe is nowhere close to any of these things. The magnitude of change is amazing, and we're still sitting here in a very rational way saying, yeah, Asia is rising and we should do something. But really, our mindset in Europe and the United States is still about the Atlantic Alliance and what you should do in Europe and what you should do in America and so on. Whereas all the action in the digital economy, I think, is happening over there, much more than we appreciate. Two other things that I like to emphasize here. People in Asia are still dreaming. They are full of optimism and hope. I saw a survey done asking Europeans the following question. The question was, do you believe your country will be better off tomorrow relative to yesterday? And you won't be surprised to hear that the majority of Europeans, they say no to this question. In Norway, 95% of people said, no, my country will not be better tomorrow relative to yesterday. You go to Asia, 100% of people say, of course, because they see the transformation every day of their lives. So they are optimistic about the future and so on. So the first point I want to say is that if you are a Western company, a European company, an American company, you cannot, sit there in all honesty and underestimate what is happening in Asia. And you cannot, in all honesty, not take Asia seriously. I cannot think of any company that should not be thinking about investing in that region, developing networks with companies in that region, learning from that region. If maybe later on we talk a little bit about how all the new learning, the managerial new practices, the new technologies may actually be coming from that part of the world and India in a moment. So that's point number one about the Asia region. To reinforce Ian's point, there's no question we're not going to go back to the normal that was before February 2020. We're going to see increasingly much more hybrid working, and every company will have to think what hybrid working means for it. For one company, it may mean 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. For another company, it may be 5 and 1 or whatever, which employees need to come into the office. We're going to see a migration out of the big cities. We're going to see big offices becoming co-working spaces. If I'm an employer with a lot of office space and I'm utilizing, 50% of it because the other 50% of my employees are not coming in, what do I do with that space? Maybe I turn it into a co-working space, which allows other companies to use it and so on. We're going to see a tremendous change in the design of our cities to make them livable for our people and so on. So there's a lot of these changes here. And all I'm saying is that, especially for people based in the Western world, at the rational level, we kind of get these changes and we say, yeah, I know. But deep psychologically, I think we still underestimate how important and dramatic these changes are and how seriously we have to think about what should we do in response to these changes.
Thanks, Kostas, as insightful as ever. Well, I'm going to stick with technology and innovation, and they are very much part of Rolls-Royce's DNA. Clearly, at Rolls-Royce, 1/3 of employees are engineers, and obviously the support that they have through the specialist academies and programs that Rolls-Royce obviously give their employees is second to none. So, Vicky, we talked a lot about high-value manufacturing. But obviously, high-value manufacturing, data analytics, they do present tremendous potential for growth that Kostas has obviously outlined. Together with, we do need to tap into local and diverse talent. And clearly, those opportunities are very wide across the Asean region. Maybe you could just give us your thoughts in terms of how you foster that collaboration and how you come at this from a Rolls-Royce and an industry perspective.
Thanks, Claire. I think the first is that in ASEAN, it is the world's third largest labor force behind China and India. And one key advantage in ASEAN is the young workforce. The median age of ASEAN citizens is 29. Even in 2030, ASEAN median age will be 33.6. There's 380 million ASEAN citizens under the age of 35, which is over half the population, 58% of the population. So there's immense opportunities with the growing young that is tech savvy. And there's key sort of feature of the demographics is also the diversity that you have in ASEAN. Our Rolls-Royce setup in Singapore alone employs 21 different nationalities. This is one of Singapore's strengths. When it's managed well, you can bring together the racial, ethnic, cultural, and educational diversity in a workforce that is of great advantage. But also on the flippant side, if it's not managed well, this can become a real weakness and become a fragmentation in the society because of the proximity of the different cultures and nations as well. So it is about inclusive growth. It is about understanding the cultures and the talents and bringing them into that creative thinking. And the way we do that is through close engagements between industry, governments, and academia. The vibrant and connected ecosystem is really necessary to be able to capitalize on the talent. In Singapore, we engage directly with the polytechnics, the vocational institutes, the universities, and research institutes. We take time to understand the country's strategies, country's capabilities, and then marry them with the company needs. This is exactly what we did when we partnered with Singapore on research and technology over a decade ago. And we invested jointly in Singapore's strength and the company needs in capabilities such as smart manufacturing, electrification, digital, and repair capability. So I think understanding the environment that you're in is really important, but then it is about the connectivity. And some of the mechanisms that we need to accelerate this is more government to government dialogues and where policies start to become important again. And through the lens of ASEAN, over 3.4 trillion global trade transits through the region every year. It still has 2 trillion worth of infrastructure, investment opportunities around road, rail, airports, and various others. We've seen recently the strong commitment among the ASEAN nations on the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which essentially is an FTA that promotes trade and connectivity within the region. CPTPP, which great to see UK also formally starts negotiation with the 11 members of the CPTPP, as it marks UK's interests pivot towards Asia as well, which was recently shared in the UK review. So one of the key features of this CPTPP is the rules of origin, which does allow for regional cumulation of materials to collectively qualify for the preferential tariffs. So there's greater access to services and investment protection guarantees. There's more opportunities for government procurement. There's robust IP protections that Constance mentioned earlier on, and clear benefits all sort of collectively together. Post-Brexit, it was encouraging to see UK-ASEAN economic dialogues, which were held last year, and to really strengthen the economic cooperation and to boost the collaboration in the post-pandemic recovery. But I come back to the point on trade connectivity. If you look at Singapore alone, it already has 26 FTAs with economies that represent 85% of global GDP. There's diversified trade networks that is really essential for many's promotion on the GDP growth that countries are aspiring to. And even having these in place has helped to secure alternative sources of food supply, for example, during the pandemic disruptions. It reduces the red tape and administrative delays in getting goods across borders. So these are some of the examples that I think we need to be mindful of in terms of understanding the talent within the region, fostering that sort of culture and that relationship when it comes to industry, government, and academia, and then encouragement of the government-to-government dialogues to promote that trade connectivity.
Thanks, Vicky. Very well said. Right, Costas, from your perspective, you see companies exploiting this knowledge all the time, particularly knowledge from Africa, Asia, etc., as Vicky has outlined. And also, you've got some very firm views on global trade and how you see that mix sort of coming through in the future. What are your thoughts on that, Costas?
First of all, I totally agree with Vicky. The talent of the future, the majority of it is from Asia. It will be coming from Asia and Africa, if I may say so. The younger, the demographics, if you look at the actual demographics of the Asian regions, they have all the advantages. You know, the next 30 years, you're gonna see the growth coming of this younger population moving into the workforce. Their knowledge advantage is unbelievable. I always say to my students, the developing world has a knowledge advantage over us. Why? Because we are so arrogant, you see. We think we are the well-educated people in the world, but we are not. What do I mean by that? If you ask a European or an American to name 5 politicians based in Asia or Africa, or 5 world-class athletes, or 5 actors, I guarantee you, most of us will not be able to name one of them, let alone 5. Whereas if you ask a Chinese or an Asian person to name 5 politicians or athletes or actors in the Western world, they will name you 10 of them, not 5. So why do they have the advantage? We know about our wealth and we don't know about their wealth over there. They know their wealth and they know our wealth as well as we do. They have a knowledge advantage. So the question is, you know, how do we access this kind of talent? You know, well, it's not, you know, you have to develop your networks. You have to develop processes that allow you to get close to these people. As Vicky said, develop relationships, let's say, with local universities in Singapore, in Asian countries, in China, and so on. The other thing that I encourage people to think is that, you know, instead of us going to attract them, become an attractive magnet for this talent. A Chinese or an Asian student or an African student may be sitting there saying, why should I go and work with these boring multinationals or Western companies when I can go and work with these, you know, high growth, exciting companies in Asia or Africa? What is it that we are doing as organizations to make ourselves more attractive to this new talent? And I don't want to get into the specifics of exactly what you need to do, but everybody should be asking that question. How can we make our organization so special that the talent of the future knocks on our doors? We don't go and knock on their door. They knock on our door saying, I want to work for you.
Thanks, Costas. It's obviously why ESG is being embedded into so many companies. So let me come to Ian. Ian, Grosvenor's been now in Europe for many years, but it's also been active in Asia for 25 years. How do you feel about taking advantage of investment as Vicky and Costas have outlined?
Thanks, Claire. So Grosvenor has always operated a very decentralized approach to real estate investment across the whole of the world. So we have operating companies in the UK, obviously, in Europe, in the Americas, and in Asia Pacific. And what that really means is that where we actually want to invest, we have an office in that city. So as we say, local people make the best local property decisions, as they know the cities, they know the local dynamics, they know that that building is better than that building, and then foot flow here is better than foot flow there. So it's really important that we have local teams who really understand the local dynamics of the cities that they're investing in. I guess the key challenge for us is how to combine the best local talent, and I absolutely take Costas' points about attracting that local talent and what we bring to the game here, right? And you're right, Claire, to talk about ESG. I mean, you know, Grosvenor has always been very clear that we are here to deliver lasting commercial and social benefit. It's not just about the commercial. So we make a very strong play about our own social benefit that we're looking to embed in all of the projects that we do. So we want to attract the best local talent, but obviously we've got to make sure we combine that with a Grosvenor way of working, if you will, that our local talent understands our culture, our attitude to risk, and how that works. And of course, what is extremely important for us as a property company is property rights and the rule of law in any country that we invest in. And we need to collectively know to really understand how the local environment works, not just when things are going well, but when there is a turn in the market. How will our rights, be protected in those circumstances? So I think there's huge opportunity there in Asia, and we're working very hard with local partners as well to try and make sure that we understand what's going on in those markets, and the technology. Property you don't associate with really being very heavy on technology side, but actually there's a lot of property technology going on, whether it's drones to do mapping of areas, whether you've got batteries embedded in buildings. There's a whole lot of different things you can do for construction materials. So there's a lot of technological development that's going on at the same time.
Thanks, Ian. And we're going to open up the questions very shortly. So please do put your questions and we will put them to the panelists. But Ian very, very neatly transitioned us into sustainability, and clearly it has already come up many times. But Vicky, let's come to you, because clearly Rolls-Royce sustainability is core to your strategy. And clearly the way that you're reacting to the pace of change is just phenomenal. Do you just want to give your thoughts on this point?
Thanks, Claire. Globally, our activities have a tremendous impact on the world today and tomorrow. And as part of the UN Race to Zero campaign, we have pledged to achieve net zero carbon in our operations by 2030. Also playing quite a leading role in enabling the sectors in which we operate to reach net zero by 2050. And this is through the development of new products and technologies. What's really exciting is that in the coming weeks, we'll be launching our net zero carbon report, which shows a pathway for 2050 net zero target, including setting interim targets and milestones. So to get all this rolling and implemented, and to support this, we're pivoting our R&D expenditure towards low carbon solutions, including hybrid, hydrogen and electrical power. Our approaches will have a significant focus on electrifications, where we look at technologies to electrify train journeys, regional flights, boats, to really make carbon-free travel in the future. Sustainable aviation fuel is really an exciting area for us. As we transition to lower carbon alternative fuels, we've demonstrated our engine's compatibility with the new fuel types, with ground testing of 100% unblended sustainable aviation fuel into our Trent engines. So the first results that we've seen have been absolutely fantastic, and we've done a test flight on the Pearl 700. SMR, small modular reactors, we're also really focused on working closely with consortium and the UK government on enabling small modular nuclear reactors for future power deployment. So these are all new fantastic technologies, but we're also improving our fuel efficiency, emissions and noise of our existing products. The A350 XWB flight typically is 6 hours, but at the same time can be configured for 19-hour flights. If you look at the transition that we've made in the last 25 years, year after year, there's been fuel efficiency improvements. And currently the XWB provides 15% more fuel efficiency than the first generation of the Trent. We've also got the ultra long range that we are investing into a huge world's largest aero engine, potentially to power both the narrow body and the wide body. And that has an opportunity to deliver 25% fuel efficiency improvement compared to the first generation of Trent engines. So huge amount of focus. You're absolutely right. Sustainability is embedded within our strategy. It touches our products, services, operations, and technology is a key way we're going to deliver this.
Thanks, Vicky. On sustainability, such a big question, such a big topic. And what I'm going to do now is, in the 10 minutes we've got left, is just really come over to the audience and just looking through the questions, some really interesting questions. There's actually one that we haven't had yet, which is, How do we balance the need to set ambitious targets with the risk of failing to achieve? And will the markets applaud us for the ambition or criticise us if we fail? So who better to answer that than our academic Costas?
Thank you, Claire. It is a difficult question. I don't pretend to have the answer to that one. Will the markets applaud you for the ambition? Yes, and that will be the short-term reaction, especially if you communicate the ambition in a persuasive way to the market and say, wow, look at that, wouldn't that be great if we achieve this? Would they criticize you if you fail? Yes, not only criticize you, they will, you're gonna see it in your stock price if you fail and so on. So, you know, this is a fine balance that needs to be struck between, on the one hand, motivating the organization by setting a stretch goal, an ambitious target, but at the same time being realistic enough to say, look, you know, is it really an ambitious target here that I'm setting, or is it unrealistic? There's no way we're ever gonna achieve it, and so on. So you have to find a balance there in terms of the ambition you set for the organization, and set one that it can be ambitious, but at the same time you think it's achievable. Secondly, don't just set the ambition. I think what you need to do is to develop, well, let's say, a staircase of actions and strategies that you need to implement to allow you to reach that ambition. It may take years to achieve the stretch ambition, and the market is not patient enough to wait 10 years for you to deliver. What you need to do is translate the ambitions into long-term targets, intermediate targets, short-term targets, like a staircase. And you say to the market, look, you know, or in 10 years, I'm gonna go to the moon, but, you know, in the first year, my aspiration is to achieve X. And if I achieve X, the second year, I'm gonna achieve Y. And if I achieve Y, the third year, I'm gonna achieve Z, and so on. So it's like a staircase of targets that can give you a guidance as to whether you're achieving the target or not. And, you know, it takes courage to set these ambitious goals, but the evidence is that, you know, if you set one and if you succeed with it, you know, the market will reward you, and not only the market, but, you know, your profitability of your company will reflect that. There is a risk in it, but I think, in my opinion, if you manage the risk, it is a worthwhile ambition to set for yourself.
But Claire,
Thanks.
can I just come in on this? I think it's really important to note that there's only so much you can do as a company on your own. And we all need to be rowing in the same direction on this. And there's undoubtedly a kind of education process, as well as you know, skills and knowledge gaps that need to be filled on this. But undoubtedly, there's a massive amount of policy alignment and guidelines, and people just knowing what the rules of the game are that work. I mean, I think we've done a tremendous. There's been tremendous progress in the last few years on sustainable finance, but that really is, I suppose, necessary but insufficient, really. That's very helpful, but it doesn't get us where we need to get to. So just to take a kind of example from my sector, I think, and I'm going to focus on the UK, Costas. So sorry about my lack of Asean focus here, but there was a great article in The Economist this week about highlighting the challenges and dilemmas of being both green and protecting heritage assets. So it was about the city of Bath. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's committed to be going carbon neutral by 2030. But every time they try to make a change, like put in double glazing or improved energy efficiency, they don't meet planning rules, because all of our planning rules are set up to protect these heritage buildings and not change anything. So how do you preserve that heritage but make it more energy efficient? It's extremely difficult. And in fact, just today, Grosvenor has launched a new report on exactly that same subject, and trying to say what do we need, what are the different issues that need to be addressed in order to move that forward. And you need policy that balances, you know, protecting heritage and moving forward into, you know, the new climate change environment that we've got in the 21st century. We need detailed guidance so that everybody in the sector knows what to do, whether they're owners or construction. We need the supply chain skills, because this will be enabled by technology. So we need to train people up. We need to know what those new technologies are. And there do have to be the right cost incentives. And then we need to have the kind of capacity in local planning and local government to drive the right behaviours. So, you know, a lot of these, and it's a very parochial example I've got from my sector, but it's an important one to show there's a balance, and we need to get everybody aligned here. And you know, with housing and also with a lot of other sectors, there's this big issue of stock versus flow, right? So we can go out now and build, you know, a net zero carbon house. You can build a net zero carbon car. You can build a net zero carbon plane, probably, right? So, you know, but we've got all this stock of stuff that we've got, which already exists. The UK has the highest proportion of housing stock over 100 years old in Europe. So 1 in 5 houses are over 100 years old. Those are significant challenges to get from here to there, right? So, you know, I think there's a lot to do here, but I think we need to be joined up with government policy as well.
Thanks, Ian. I mean, you say it so eloquently, the whole point of transition and funding the transition and making sure that we do that across business, across government. We're coming into the last few minutes really of the session, and we really have covered such a mass of content. But I do want to come back to our panelists in closing. And a lot of this is underpinned by new ways of working, and the Treasurer is pivotal to these new ways of working. We've picked it up a lot through the course of the last few minutes, but let me first of all go to Vicky and just asking Vicky really for closing takeaway messages that he would like you to sort of embed and take from the session. Vicky.
Thanks, Claire. I think we must keep firm on committing to sustainability for the long term. And developing new technologies and capabilities. The deepening alliances, partnership and connectivity will be crucial for a stronger future for all of us. All geographies and many industries are going through a period of incredible disruption, and the world will eventually overcome the pandemic, and people will once again want to meet and explore and do so sustainably. So it's an incredible challenge in front of us, and we're really eager to meet it.
Mute. Claire, you're on mute.
Yeah, you're muted.
Disrupted there. Costas, we would love to hear your wise words, sir.
I think, thanks, Claire. I think everybody, I think, in my opinion, is asking the question, how should we respond to all this disruption? I don't think, to be honest, that is the real challenge that we're facing. It's not a matter of a disruption. We live in a world of continuous disruption. And by that, I mean that we're facing one disruption and trying to respond to it. And while we're responding to that disruption, another one hits us. So we have to respond to that one. And while we're trying to respond to the other one, another one hits us. It's like, you know, I feel like a boxer in the ring, and we're being hit all the time, you know. And so the challenge is not how do I respond to disruption? The challenge, I think, is how do I organize in the culture, the structures, the processes of my organization, the people, so that no matter what disruption hits me, whenever, because I cannot predict what the next disruption is going to be, so you have to be ready for it. So how can we, you know, develop the cultures, the mindsets, the people to face this world where disruption is continuous, one after the other, without giving us time in between to rest and you know, prepare.
Thank you, Costas. And Ian, last but not least, what closing takeaway messages do you have for our audience?
I think building on both what Vicky and Costas said, it's very easy as a corporate treasurer to be very internally focused on just looking at your cash and your bank accounts and your FX exposures and trying to kind of make sure the processes all work efficiently. But you know, we do need to look more widely. And whether that's looking more widely at disruption and looking more widely at sustainability, it's really important to spend a sufficient amount of your working day looking more broadly at what's going on in the environment, in your business and beyond. And you know, we can't just solve these problems on our own. We've got to do it in collaboration with other corporate partners, with universities, with governments, with policymakers and academics. So it's a broad solution.
Thank you, Vicky, Costas, Ian. It's been a real pleasure to be your compere for today. On behalf of Standard Chartered and all of you, thank you very much to our audience for listening. Clearly, what we have done over the course of the last few minutes is really talk about the Great Reset and some really fantastic closing remarks from everybody. Thank you and good morning, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.